They said Jay-Z was my dad. They said...
we out here on vacation in the Bahamas, another beautiful day. Check it out, check it out. Boom. I want to talk to y'all for a minute about the power of perception.
Versus... Whoa, wait, don't give away too much, man. Yeah, okay, I can say clone, I want to say clone. All right, so there's like a clone.
The Epstein files reveal the largest genocide in human history, and it is being hidden from your eyes. 8 million children go missing every single year. Look at all these people with black eyes. Politicians, your famous actors, the Pope, high-level people. They all participate. This is an email from the Epstein files. All you need is a blood transfusion from the pack and you reverse aging.
Do you think you're the devil himself?
No, but I do have a good mirror.
It's a serious question. Do you think you're the devil himself?
I don't know. Why would you say that?
Any dirty money?
If you live...
I just asked a question. Is your money dirty money?
No, it's not. So, in fact...
Why is it not dirty money?
Because I earned it. A heart...
But you earned it...
The video opens by confronting the audience with an uncomfortable question that has lingered in Hollywood for decades, but rarely gets addressed directly. Why do so many young stars explode onto the scene, dominate headlines, secure massive opportunities, and then suddenly disappear without explanation? The narrator frames this not as coincidence, but as a pattern that becomes harder to ignore the more you look at it. Careers don't just collapse overnight without pressure, and they don't unravel the same way unless something deeper is at play. Recently, old interviews, resurfaced statements, and newly released documents have pushed people to re-examine stories they once brushed off. What once sounded like wild accusations are now being replayed with fresh context, and the timing alone has made people uneasy. The narrator makes it clear this story isn't about proving guilt or naming villains, but about understanding how power, access, and silence operate behind the scenes. Viewers are invited to listen closely, not for shock value, but for the pattern hiding in plain sight. Because once that pattern becomes visible, it changes how everything else is seen. The narrator shifts focus to a concept that sounds harmless on the surface, but appears repeatedly in stories tied to industry breakdowns: mentorship. In Hollywood, mentorship is often sold as a golden bridge between talent and longevity, especially for young performers navigating sudden fame. Powerful figures offer guidance, access, and protection, and from the outside, it looks like a dream setup. But according to multiple public accounts, the experience behind closed doors doesn't always match the image. Over time, several entertainers have described these mentorships as confusing at best and damaging at worst, especially when the mentor holds unchecked influence over contracts, casting, and public perception. The narrator carefully emphasizes that not all mentorships are harmful, but when the same names keep resurfacing across different stories, it raises legitimate questions. What starts as career guidance can quietly blur into control, dependency, and silence. And when young stars feel trapped between gratitude and fear, speaking out becomes nearly impossible. The narrator hints that this is where the story begins to darken, not because of what's proven, but because... The video then revisits voices that tried to speak years earlier and were immediately dismissed. Comedians, insiders, and former collaborators warned about behavior they described as disturbing, only to be labeled bitter, unstable, or attention-seeking. At the time, their credibility was questioned, and their careers often suffered as a result. The narrator explains how Hollywood has a long history of punishing people who talk too early, long before public opinion is ready to listen. What once sounded outrageous now feels eerily specific when revisited alongside recent developments. The audience is reminded that truth in this industry isn't rejected because it's false, but because it's inconvenient. Timing determines whether someone is called brave or crazy. The narrator doesn't claim these warnings were accurate in every detail, but points out how consistently they were ignored. And that silence didn't protect anyone, it only delayed the conversation. The question now isn't why these people spoke out, but why no one wanted to hear them when it mattered most. The video then revisits voices that tried to speak years earlier and were immediately dismissed. Comedians, insiders, and former collaborators warned about behavior they described as disturbing, only to be labeled bitter, unstable, or attention-seeking. At the time, their credibility was questioned, and their careers often suffered as a result. The narrator explains how Hollywood has a long history of punishing people who talk too early, long before public opinion is ready to listen. What once sounded outrageous now feels eerily specific when revisited alongside recent developments. The audience is reminded that truth in this industry isn't rejected because
that came to me and begged me for my help. I told her to get the fuck away from Charlie. I did everything that I could do to get Bryshere, to help her get Bryshere out of California into Chicago State to be ready for filming. She knew she knew what Will did to him. But because of Charlie, see? And Charlie had promised her all kinds of things. And all she had to do was pretend to be a broken down single mom who worked her way up through the ghetto and raised a superstar for television, when the truth is she wasn't nothing but a dealer's. That's all she ever was. She went from dealer to dealer, and then she snitched on whoever she needed to snitch on until she could get to the bigger bag, until she got with Larry Lair, my friend who raised Bryshere in $1 million home. Your whole book is lies, Andy, and I hope anybody that bought it asks for a refund and demands it comes out of your pocket every time they see your son's game.
Yaz's mom brought Yaz to Charlie, and Charlie came and got me and was like, "What you want to do?" I started writing for Yaz, like that's why it makes me mad to see what's going on with him right now. Like I can't believe what I'm watching.
Right.
I can't believe what I'm watching. Like, for you to flip that way and turn like you doing gay porn, and like, what is wrong with you, man? No disrespect to anybody gay, but it's just like,
because it was him.
It's a kid I watched from a baby grow up, so it's like, and then like the mental issues that he have. You feel what I'm saying? I know he had mental issues. Like, he ain't all the way there. So to watch all this happening, it's like, all right, where are all the people that was around when the money was around?
It's false, but because it's inconvenient. Timing determines whether someone is called brave or crazy. The narrator doesn't claim these warnings were accurate in every detail, but points out how consistently they were ignored. And that silence didn't protect anyone. It only delayed the conversation. The question now isn't why these people spoke out, but why no one wanted to hear them when it mattered most. Attention turns to the sudden downfall of a once promising star, whose trajectory made no sense on paper. At their peak, everything seemed aligned. Critical acclaim, fan support, and major opportunities stacked back to back. Then, without warning, the momentum vanished. The narrator describes how public narratives often reduce these collapses to bad choices or personal issues, ignoring how rarely those explanations tell the full story. Substance struggles, erratic behavior, and public breakdowns are usually framed as causes, not consequences. But when you examine the timeline, the cracks appear long before the public sees the collapse. The narrator carefully avoids ridicule, instead emphasizing how fame amplifies untreated trauma rather than creating it. The industry applauds success, but distances itself from decline, leaving the individual to carry the blame alone. Viewers are encouraged to question whether these breakdowns are random or the result of pressure systems that reward obedience and punish resistance. And once that pressure reaches a breaking point, the fall becomes inevitable.
As time passed, interviews began surfacing that reignited conversations people thought were buried. The narrator describes how viral clips, emotional testimonies, and leaked audio fragments reshaped public perception almost overnight. While none of these statements are presented as verified fact, their consistency caught attention. Different people, different times, similar stories. The narrator emphasizes that allegations alone don't equal truth, but repetition invites scrutiny. Once the internet started connecting dots, the narrative shifted from isolated incidents to possible patterns of behavior. The audience is reminded how quickly public opinion changes when stories align with documented history. What once sounded impossible begins to sound plausible when enough voices echo the same concerns. The narrator makes it clear that this shift wasn't driven by gossip alone, but by accumulated context that could no longer be ignored. Epstein's name resurfaced not because of shocking new facts, but because it exposed how powerful systems can hide in plain sight. When related documents appeared, old interviews and dismissed accusations suddenly felt harder to ignore. Not confirmed, but no longer unbelievable. His case reminded people that wealth, influence, and silence can delay accountability for years. That realization forced audiences to revisit other unexplained stories across entertainment and politics. Careers that collapsed without clear reasons, voices that were ignored, and allegations that vanished now felt connected by a pattern. Epstein became less about one individual and more about the system that protected him. This story isn't about one scandal, but a repeating pattern. Young stars rise fast, face pressure without protection, and collapse when the system moves on. Those who survive adapt or stay silent. Those who don't are labeled unstable. Power stays at the top, accountability fades, and the industry replaces fallen stars while continuing unchanged.
The video closes by confronting a harsh reality. This isn't about proving guilt or innocence. It's about patterns that repeat too often. The uncomfortable truth is that these outcomes have become predictable. Silence may delay consequences, but it never erases the harm done. Curiosity and questions are dangerous to systems built on secrecy, and once people begin asking, control weakens. Accountability may never arrive, but awareness alone disrupts the cycle. Audiences are challenged to look beyond headlines, see the structures at play, and understand that fame and power often hide what people prefer not to confront. The story doesn't end here. It lingers in the questions left behind, forcing viewers to face a system that allows these patterns to repeat, unchallenged, time and time again.